Hey guys, this filter is wild. Welcome back. We are going to continue reading from patron and painter David P. Jackson's art book, Situ Panchan and the Revival of the Encampment Style. David Jackson has been, since 2007, a curator of the Rubin Museum of Art. For 14 years, he was professor of Tibetan at Hamburg University in Germany, not in the US, in Germany. And he is author of several books and articles on Tibetan art, including A History of Tibetan Painting, Vienna, 1996. So I was actually in one of the Asia sections of the Hamburg University Library with my dear friend Lin Qingying, Miss Lin. Miss Lin was a Vajrayana practitioner before I was, but I was fortunate enough to attend some of their general events that were not involved with like empowerments, just like films and discussions. And she was a very nice friend to me while I was in Germany. And so I'm happy to see that there is another karmic connection with Hamburg because she was living there at the time and she was dating another German. I think he was studying at Hamburg University. So that's how she knew like where the Tibetan books were. Chapter 5, the later stylistic background. Mentangpa style. The fourth Shamar with episodes from his life, early 16th century. The major style to predominate in central Tibet in Karma Kagyu art before the advent of Karma Gadri was the tradition initiated in the mid-15th century by the great artist Mentangpa Menla Dondrup. In some influential circles, this style quickly eclipsed the old Tibeto-Newar synthesis. So Newars were the Nepali artists who influenced their style a lot in the previous centuries. And they have like a lot of models and sets that help them create art. But interestingly, a lot of lamas today do not count Nepal as a Vajrayana nation. They say Bhutan is the last Vajrayana nation, which is quite interesting to think about. Called the Man style after its founding painter, it departed from its predecessors through including much more Chinese landscape in the backgrounds of iconic paintings. This style prevailed throughout much of central Tibet from the late 15th or early 16th century onward. For the Karma Kagyu, this was also a widely patronized style. Before that, religious schools developed its own distinctive artistic idioms. After the Gadri was established, artists still occasionally executed paintings in this style. They may represent the works of local painters in districts where the Karma Kagyu had branch monasteries. D. Snellgrove and H. Richardson, in their Cultural History of Tibet, noted 40 years ago this important aesthetic watershed, which lay roughly in the late 15th century. They correctly emphasized the importance of Chinese imperial gifts as stimuli. From the end of the Yuan dynasty, 1368, contact was maintained by the frequent visits to China of monks and lamas of the great Tibetan monasteries. Although Chinese diplomatic fiction describes this as tribute missions, the participants, who represented no authority but their own monastery, went solely for the valuable commercial concessions they received. These business ventures added greatly to the wealth of the Tibetan Church and also provided a channel through which cultural and artistic influence might enrich Tibetan life and thought. Pearls and other precious stones, brocades, and richly worked robes, incense burners, and ritual vessels, gilded bronze and copper images found their way into the monasteries. A small lead tablet on a pillar in the cathedral at Lhasa records the offering of such presents in this period. One remarkable survival from the period was a great scroll, 50 feet long by 2.5 feet wide, describing in 5 languages, beautifully written in gold, the miraculous events of a visit to the emperor by the 5th Karmapa. The events are illustrated by panels delicately painted by a Chinese artist. The effect of Chinese art on Tibetan painting, especially in Karmapa and Sakyapa monasteries of East Tibet, may also be seen at this time. Tibetan painting, always religious in content apart from conventional decorative motifs, began by following Indian Buddhist painting in the portrayal of the great Buddhist gods. Such a painting normally consists of a symmetrical arrangement of divine figures with the main divinity, usually painted on a larger scale. In the center, here we have a white Amitābha in the center. Above the central figure, there sometimes appears the Supreme Buddha figure, of which the central divinity is considered to be the emanation. Quite early, it became common to represent right along the top of such a painting the tradition of lamas and teachers, through whom a particular ritual had passed up to the time of the painting's execution. It then became the custom, and this seems to have been an entirely Tibetan development, to portray a revered lama as the central figure, the more so as lamas occupied the central position by divine right in the eyes of their disciples. It became common to represent a particular lama as the manifestation of a particular divinity, indicated by the gestures he adopted and the implements he was holding. Now, under Chinese influence, a far freer arrangement of the main figures became acceptable. The main figure may be no longer in the center, but arranged with other figures in the kind of balanced way that we in the West now expect. The painting of landscape begins to develop never as the main feature as in Chinese painting, but as decorative motifs, which combined with the religious figures of the painting further assist towards the production of an altogether freer style. Especially in paintings from eastern Tibet, the individual painter, while still bound to follow the prescribed model and measurements for each major figure, has a new scope to produce a religious work of art which he himself conceives of as pleasing, whereas earlier generations of Tibetan painters tended to be craftsmen who produced rather diagrammatical, although often extremely beautiful groups of figures. Entry example. So you can see it's more like a diagram. And then the later artists were more like, I'm going to show off my personality a bit more. But it must not be thought that a new style of painting now entirely displaced the older ones. As happened in other spheres of Tibetan culture, all the various traditions continued to exist and develop side by side, some preferred by one line of painters, some by another. Styles of painting were transmitted from master to pupil in exactly the same way as religious teachings were passed on. And just as brilliant religious teachers might give a new form to the teachings he had received, so a brilliant painter, nearly always, however anonymous, might develop a new style in his school. So all the thangkas I bought from McLeodganj in India were not signed, but the ones I bought from Nepal, I bought one. The one I bought from Nepal was signed. So in Latin, This is Akashgarba from Situ set of 8 great bodhisattvas. A portrait of the 4th Shamar with episodes from his life. The earliest example of Karma Kagyu painting from this period and in the Manri style is figure 5.1. I already showed you guys. It was the one in the beginning. This thangka, which probably dates to the early 16th century, depicts the 4th Shamar Lama together with a series of episodes from his young adulthood. Stylistically, this piece is not very apt for comparison, since it is from the narrative genre and not an iconic image. But David includes it because dated images from this period are rare, and at least the central figure can be compared as a portrait. The rest of the painting tells a hagiographic story. Depictions of a number of episodes from the 4th Shamar's life fill 6 successive horizontal panels in the background of the painting, and brief explanations of the exploits depicted here have been written in golden letters in the 7 thin vermilion strips above and below the narrative panels. Each panel contains 8 or 9 episodes. except the third and fourth panels, which are partly occupied by the main figure and therefore could only depict about 4 episodes each, 2 episodes to both right and left. This painting originally formed a part of a multiple painting series in which the entire life story of the 4th Shamar Chodrak Yeshe was portrayed. The present thangka depicts in particular the end of the first chapter or main section of his biography and the beginning of the second, and thus might have been the second painting of an entire set. The 4th Shamar was a disciple of such great masters as the 7th Karmapa Chodrak Gyatso, Jampal Zampo, and the Gyaltsab Goshri Paljor Dondrup. He was the founder of the monastery of Yangpachen northwest of Lhasa, where he began constructing in 1503 and later became the Shamar Lama's principal seat. The main available source on the 4th Shamar's life is a long section in Situ Panchen and Bellow's history of the Karma Kagyu tradition. The account runs up to about the year 1505, and it is based on the Shamar's otherwise unavailable autobiography. His autobiography isn't available to us. The passages in Situ Panchan's history that correspond to the painted episodes refer to the Shamar's travel during the 22nd year, 1473, through Dar Tang Do to areas of the far eastern borderlands, such as the 3 districts of Tre, Rong, and Jak. He is said to have gone to the presence of the Karmapa Chodrak Gyatso, who had also traveled to the eastern borderlands at that time, and it was then that he received the infinite ocean of the doctrine, instructions from him, Stanpa Gyatso Tayas, the infinite ocean of the doctrine, instructions. From the Karmapa and the second teacher, Jampal Gyatso, he also received many teachings, and he stayed with the Karmapa for some time. Then, in his 24th year, he returned by way of such districts as Ling and Riwoche to Densa Til in central Tibet, passing on the way through Gandan Mamo. It was in central Tibet at this time that he received important teachings from Go Lotsawa Shonupal, 1392 to 1481. There are at least 3 Lotsawas, and I think this one's the latest one. So just keep in mind, not all of the Lotsawas are the same person. They just name themselves the same. Lochen Sonam Gyatso, 1424 to 1482. Other sources state at age 17, the 4th Shamar briefly visited Mongolia. This may be what is shown in a few episodes of the painting. His journey to Mongolia is also referred to in a recent biographical dictionary. In his history of the Karma Kagyu tradition, Situ Panchan does not seem to mention such a journey to Hor or Sogyul, Mongolia, as such, but alludes to the 4th Shamars having wanted previously to go to India, adding that this wish was never realized. As a close disciple of the aged Go Lotsawa Shonupal and Lochen Sonam Gyatso, both important preceptors of the Pakmodru rulers, the 4th Shamar became closely associated with the Pakmodru court, whose rulers were by then mere figureheads dominated by their powerful uncles, the lords of Rinpung. In middle age, he was extremely powerful, influencing affairs in central Tibet, and in late 1490s and in the first 2 decades of the 16th century, in cooperation with the lords of Rinpungs, the strongest warlords of the day, who directly ruled the 2 central provinces of U and Zhang from 1499 to 1517. So I think this is when the Driku master went to Bhutan and then started, his thing in Bhutan. Because he was fighting with the Pakmodru, who were using magic as well. In 1493, the Shamar took responsibility for the leadership of the old Pakmodru monastic seat, Densa Til, assuming the highest religious office of Jenga, for lack of a royal monk who normally filled that position. 10 years later, in 1503, he founded his main seat of Yangpachen in a remote northern location, and in Lhasa, the monastery Thupten Chokor. A second Menri portrait, the 5th Shamar with previous lives. Zimmermann collection. Another thangka painted in the Mentampa style that can be dated to before the advent of the Karma encampment style is figure 5.2, a portrait of one of the Shamar tulkus with his previous incarnations. Presumably, it portrays the fifth, Konchak Yenluk, 1525 to 83, as the main figure, and if so, it dates to about the mid or late 16th century. In addition to the political importance of the fourth Shamar, the next two Shamar tulkus were eminent religious figures who were active from the mid-16th until the early 17th century, serving as the main gurus of the 9th and 10th Karmapas. Their tulku lineage was widely known for its red ceremonial hat, hence also the name Shamar, literally red hat. In this thangka, the main figure is shown wearing the red hat depicted here with a triple jewel emblem in the front. In this painting, the main figure is accompanied by a lineage above and by golden handprints and footprints to his right and left. This thangka from the private Zimmermann family collection has been published several times. The main figure was at first identified as the Karma Kagyu Lama Chitsang Rinpoche, and then as a Kagyu Lama. This painting clearly belongs to the Karma Kagyu school. Among the five minor figures pictured above, the top central figure is the red Buddha Vajra Dharma, Dorje Chos. The subsequent series of minor figures seems not to depict a transmission lineage, but rather the rebirths or tulku lineage of the main figure. 3 out of 4 of the masters wear the same red hat, which marks them as the first 3 Shamar lamas. Since the red hat of the Shamar played such an important role in his identity, its absence in the case of figure number 5 is curious. This figure portrays the fourth Shamar's great master, Jampal Zangpo, a teacher of the main Mahamudra Pyakchen lineage, who is depicted elsewhere in thangkas of main lineage gurus wearing this sort of hat. In any case, that the fourth figure is the third Shamar is confirmed by the golden inscription below it. It may be possible to confirm other identifications one day by reading other faint inscriptions under magnification or an infrared camera. Since the main purpose of this painting was to show the Shamar lineage in all its glory, figure number 5 is most likely to be the fourth Shamar. Here he did not wear his red hat, but possibly that of the highest royal monk of Densa Tel, the head monastery of the Tibetan Pagmodru government, a title he alone among them possessed. That would necessitate identifying the main figure as the fifth Shamar, and moving the dating of the thangka forward to the second half of the 16th century. If this identification is correct, the figures are, number 1. Okay, let me show you guys the painting while I read this. Vajra Dharma, and then this is Vajra Dharma. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. Mahakal. Mahamudra. Vajradharma, first Shamar, second Shamar, third Shamar, fourth Shamar, fifth Shamar, the patron, a disciple of the fifth Karmapa. All the figures of the teachers wearing the red hat, including the central figure, hold their hands in identical gestures of teaching. Who was the fifth Shamar Karmapa, to whom this and numerous other paintings were devoted? The fifth Sharma was born in 1525 at Ganden Kangsar of Sholmo in the Upper Kongpo district near the southern tribal borderlands and the holy pilgrimage spot of Saritra. His birth accorded with a prophecy made by his previous incarnation. His father was of royal lineage. When the eighth Karmapa passed through Kongpo on pilgrimage, he saw the child and recognized him provisionally as the rebirth, naming him Konchok Yenlan. He was officially recognized in 1527 at age of 2 when he passed a test involving the choice of a statue showing the second Shamar instead of one of Karma Pakshi. While a child, Konchok Yenlak learned some religious texts by heart and effortlessly learned to read and write. At age 7, he took ordination as a celibate lay follower and was made to wear the red hat of his lineage. In 1538, at age 13, he received many important initiations from Pawo Tsuklak Trengwa. He also learned in the same year from his teacher Lotsawa Kunga Chotsang Sanskrit grammar, Sanskrit ornate poetry, and other non-doctrinal subjects, including religious art. In 1542, at age 17, Konchok Yenlak took full ordination from the 8th Karmapa, who was assisted in the ceremony by the Pawo Toku. He then devoted himself to the continuous intensive study of the great scholastic texts. At the order of the Karmapa, he pursued such studies at the monastery of Gandamamo in Kongpo under Namgyal Drakpa, a great scholar. His fame for learning, discipline, and kindness soon spread widely. In 1546, he performed a meditative retreat in Saritra with excellent results. In 1561, some years after the passing of his chief guru, the 8th Karmapa, Konchok Yenlak led the enthronement ceremony for the rebirth of the Karmapa, whom he had found in Kham and fetched back to central Tibet. In general, he was very religious and hardly engaged in any mundane activities at all. He attained a high level of spiritual realization, as witnessed by the wonders he performed and by his visionary experiences. He composed several books relating to Buddhist doctrine and meditation practice. During his lifetime, Konchok Yenlak built several new temples and also restored through rebuilding a number of older ones. In particular, he was extremely fond of commissioning sacred works of art, including a famous large image of the Buddha. He played a major part in beginning the Gadri painting school, influencing Namkha Jashi, the founder of the style. For instance, in 1568, while in Pakmotse on the way to Taklong, he received a completed painting that he had instructed the young painter Namkha Jashi to make. He ordered Namkha Jashi to copy a wonderful painting of the good deeds of the Buddha, made by more than a century earlier by the great Mentongpa, who had copied a silk Chinese scroll painting of Nenying Monastery. The Shamar at this time wrote the inscriptions for the thangka and also composed a brief exposition of the Buddha's 12 main deeds, having this text written in golden letters on silk scrolls that could be hung to the right and left of the main painting. In the course of his life, Konchok Yenlak gave full ordination to at least 1,000 monks. His main students included most of the eminent lamas of the following generation, including the 9th Karmapa, whose main guru he became. At his death in 1583 and in the following weeks, remarkable signs occurred. Fire seemed to fall from the sky, and 2 Indian birds suddenly arrived, flying up and paying respect to his remains. After his cremation, a holy reliquary stupa was built in his honor at Yangpachen. Another thangka from a Korean museum portrays the 5th Shamar Konchak Yenlek, who died in 1583, second half of 16th century, courtesy of the Han Cultural Foundation. Though because of its damage, the work does not lend itself to detailed analysis. The minor lama below is not shown in the position of lineage guru, but instead a student or patron. He might be a situ tulku from this period. The painting contains some Menri styles, but it does not look like a pure Menri Atsang of the time. The thin washes of the sky and treatment of waves hint at a possible connection with an early Gadri or Kham style. Stylistically, I would place it on the edge of the Menri and historically near the beginning of Gadri. The second painting of the 5th Shamar Konchok Yenlak belongs to a set portraying the main gurus of the combined main lineages of the Karma Kagyu. It seems to be a painting in the Menri style slightly later than the previous one. My hypothesis is that it dates to the period 1580s to 1630s. I cannot do much more here than note the existence of this set and hope that its last few paintings can be identified one day. Fortunately for historians, one other painting from this set survives and has been published and will be discussed. A third thangka from the same museum portrays the 3rd Karmapa and 6 episodes of his life. The third Karmapa with episodes from his life, late 16th century.